Is the slow charger rollout the reason for slow EV adoption? We'll discuss that next on the news trip. Hey, everybody, this is Travis. So, the other day I was kind of talking to a friend of mine who has an EV. It's not a Tesla, though, it's the Audi, it's the e Tron. And I gotta say one thing, the car is really nice. Um, What he doesn't like about it the most is the charging networks. You know, unlike Tesla, who built out their own charging networks, the supercharger network, which are abundant. Everywhere you go, you pretty much find a supercharger. Any road trip, any major highway, any major town. But I think what's going on with this is the fact that, most of these other car manufacturers are relying on Electrify America, EVgo, ChargePoint, the main players in this space, to basically roll out the networks so people can travel with these cars. Now, I don't think it's really that big of a deal for most people, because I don't think most people are actually traveling across the entire United States with these things. But it's for people who want to do that, and it's even for people who just, I live out west, and one of the biggest problems we have out here is it's very far distances between each town. You know, if I want to go down to the closest town to us is Pocatello. Pocatello is almost an hour away. So, if you've got a range of 70, 80 miles, you're not going to be able to make it to Pocatello. And, that's a problem. Because, there's chargers in our town, and then there's chargers in Pocatello. But the range on some of these cars is not far enough to get between that gap. So, this becomes a big problem for a lot of car manufacturers. Now, the cars that are coming out now that have 200, 300 miles of range, it's becoming a smaller and smaller problem. But every time I talk to somebody about electric cars, that's the number one issue brought up: the range of the car and the charging of the car. It's not, oh, well, I don't like the styling, I don't like the look of them, I want the engine noise, I want this, I want that. It's not even the prices, per se, which is, I figured for a while was going to be the biggest downfall of them, because these cars are not cheap. But no, it's actually, from what I've experienced, it's the charging and the range that puts most people off of these cars. And I think this is, one of the things we saw with the e-Golf. I think that was the biggest problem with that car. It was kind of a mismatched car. It was, I have a Volkswagen Golf, and it's a great road trip car. But the e-Golf was so limited in its range and its abilities to charge that I think a lot of people they didn't want to deal with it. And you could buy a Golf for almost half the cost of an e-Golf. So it was like, why would I spend almost $40,000 on an e-Golf for less range, less capabilities, and it's almost identical to a regular Golf? It really doesn't have any benefits besides the charging and the price of fuel. But my Golf, I can get 40 miles to the gallon with it, so it's not that big of a problem. It's still not as good as an electric car for efficiency and for cost, but it's very good. So I think that was one of the things that really hindered the e-Golf. I think the biggest area that manufacturers should be focused on, I think Tesla, from a charging standpoint, absolutely dominates all of the other manufacturers, the car manufacturers, because they're relying on third parties to do this anyway. But the beauty of third parties doing it is now you're going to have more options for more cars. The Teslas, you're kind of relying on the superchargers, which is a great network. It's a world-class network, and I think it's a lot better than the ones that are out already. As it goes on, those networks like Electrify America, ChargePoint, EVgo are going to get better. And when they get better, it's going to help the entire industry. Not just the Teslas, because Teslas will be able to use the CHAdeMO charger with an adapter at these stations also. I think we're going to see Tesla come out with a CCS2 adapter for the Teslas also. So, you'll be able to utilize all these chargers. And in Europe, I think we're going to see Tesla open up the charging network to non-Teslas. I think since they use a standard over there, the CCS standard, I think we're going to see that open up. There were some talks that about 6 months ago that people thought they were doing this with Volkswagen, that they were going to allow Volkswagens to charge at it. That's my thoughts on this issue, and I think the perception versus the reality is what's actually slowing down the electric vehicle sales in this country. I think people have a perception of what an EV is and what the limitations are, and it doesn't match what the reality is as of right now. It kind of matches what it was 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, and in some cases even a year ago. But the more and more I look up this stuff, the more and more I'm finding that Electrify America, ChargePoint, EVgo, all these charging networks are growing and expanding rapidly. And the reliability is getting better. That's the other big problem that I've heard from it, is the reliability on these charging networks is not very good. People get to a charger and the chargers are broke. And they look on the app and it doesn't say anything about that. That's a big issue. Especially when you've got a car with a shorter range. See, if you get to one and you've only got 5 miles worth of range, you're probably not going to be able to find another charger. So, I think the reliability, as it gets better and as they expand this out, I think the adoption rate of EVs is going to go up tremendously. I can tell you from me driving just the Tesla Model 3, I was sold on EVs the minute I drove that car. It drives like nothing else, and it looks like nothing else from the interior and the way that it actually works. It is like nothing else. And I think that's the beauty of them. And as we see like Rivian, and we see Lucid, and we see a bunch of these other car manufacturers, including Ford and Chevy and GM or GMC coming out with EVs, I think we're going to see the adoption rate go up because there's going to be more choices. I think that's another major factor of why the adoption rate is so slow. If you don't like Teslas, there's just not a whole lot out there right now. Now, that's not to say there's not going to be, but as of right now, there's only a handful of EVs that are really worth thinking about. I hope this gave you guys a good insight onto the charging issues in the U.S. and around the world. I think other countries are really taking the lead on this stuff, like China and Europe. And I think the United States, we're going to be a major player in this soon also. But I hope this gives you a good overview of my thoughts on what's keeping EV adoption so slow. And I think it is the charging networks and the perception of the charging networks that people have. Make sure to subscribe and like this video, and make sure to hit that bell notification so you get all the latest updates when I post a video. And I will see you guys in the next one. And remember, stay charged.